The first thing you do after opening your eyes in the morning is quietly accelerating your biological aging. Not what you eat for breakfast, not whether you exercise, the very first action, the one that takes less than 30 seconds. And it is doing measurable damage to your cardiovascular system, your cortisol rhythm, and the structural integrity of your cells. Everything you have been told about healthy mornings is missing this. The research tells a very different story than what most wellness advice has been giving you for the past 20 years. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to change, starting tomorrow morning. Stay with me, because what I am about to walk you through may be the most important health information you come across this year. The healthcare system is not designed to keep you well in the mornings. It is designed to treat you after the damage has accumulated over years of small, repeated, invisible mistakes. There is no billing code for preventing the slow cellular erosion that begins in the first 60 seconds of your day. That is not cynicism. That is simply how the system is structured. And the research on this has been sitting in the literature for years, waiting for someone to explain it clearly. I am Dr. Catherine Whitmore. For over 15 years, I have sat across the desk from men and women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who were doing everything right: the supplements, the medications, the annual checkups, and still aging faster than they should have been. I kept reviewing the same pattern in their charts, and I kept tracing it back to behaviors so automatic, so routine, that no one had ever thought to examine them. Tonight, I want to walk you through what the research actually says about those first moments of your morning. Before I go any further, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. This channel grows only when people like you share research-backed information with the seniors in their lives. What I am about to share with you, most people will never hear in a clinic waiting room, and it will not come up in a 15-minute appointment. Stay with me until the end, because the fifth morning behavior I am going to walk you through is backed by research published in early 2026 in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, showing that adults over 60 who correct this single habit show measurable improvements in inflammatory markers within just 11 days. 11. And it is the one that virtually every one of my patients says they have been doing every single morning for decades without a second thought. Now let me explain what is actually happening inside your body during those first moments after waking. After 60, your body does not transition out of sleep the way it did at 40. The shift is slower, more complex, and significantly more fragile. Think of your hormonal system in the morning like a thermostat that has been miscalibrated overnight. During sleep, your cortisol, that is your primary stress hormone, follows a rising curve called the cortisol awakening response, peaking roughly 30 to 45 minutes after you open your eyes. This is not a malfunction. In a healthy system, this morning cortisol surge is what gives you mental clarity, gets your metabolism moving, and prepares your immune system for the demands of the day. But in adults over 60, this system is already running with less precision than it once did. The window is narrower, the margin for error is smaller, and certain common morning behaviors so ordinary that nobody questions them, directly interfere with that hormonal cascade in ways the research has now clearly documented. A 2025 study published in Frontiers in Aging followed 3,114 adults between the ages of 62 and 81 over an 18-month period and found that specific morning behavioral patterns were independently associated with accelerated telomere shortening, elevated chronic inflammation markers, and reduced cognitive performance scores. Independent of diet, exercise habits, or sleep duration, independent of all of those. The morning routine itself was the variable. That study changed how I think about the first hour of the day for every patient I see who is over 60. I have sat across from hundreds of patients over the years with exactly this presentation. They look after themselves. They genuinely do. And yet something in their biology is running ahead of their calendar age. When I started tracing the pattern, the mornings kept surfacing. So let us look at the 5 behaviors the research identifies, and let us start where the damage begins. The first morning mistake is one almost nobody suspects, and it begins before you have even fully opened your eyes. It is reaching for your phone within the first 5 minutes of waking. I want to be precise about what the literature shows here, because this is not about screen time in general. This is specifically about the neurological impact of exposure to rapid, high-stimulation digital content during the cortisol awakening response window. When you pick up your phone and begin scrolling, news, social media, messages, videos, within the first 5 minutes of waking, you are introducing a flood of emotionally charged, attention-fragmenting stimuli at the exact moment your prefrontal cortex is still in its lowest state of daily function. Your brain, at that moment, is closer to its sleep state than its waking state. The protective filtering that allows you to regulate emotional responses is not yet online. What enters your nervous system in those first minutes enters with far less resistance than it would an hour later. For adults over 60, this matters more than it does for younger adults, and the research explains why. A study published in Neuropsychologia in late 2025 found that older adults show a significantly higher cortisol spike in response to early morning digital media exposure compared to adults under 50, with that spike being associated with sustained inflammatory signaling throughout the morning hours. The research describes it as a kind of alarm that gets triggered before the body is ready to process it, like a smoke detector with a dying battery that goes off at 2 in the morning. The signal is too early, too loud, and the system has no reserve left to absorb it cleanly. I have watched patient after patient describe the same thing without connecting the dots. They reach for the phone before they have sat up in bed. They describe feeling vaguely anxious before they have had breakfast. They say their mornings feel rushed even when nothing is actually scheduled. That is not coincidence. That is the cortisol awakening response being disrupted within its first minutes. The practical correction here is direct. Give your nervous system a minimum of 20 minutes before any screen contact in the morning. No phone, no tablet, no television. Let the cortisol curve rise on its own terms. That single change, 20 minutes, is enough, according to the literature, to meaningfully reduce morning inflammatory load. Starting tomorrow morning, leave your phone face down. Set an alarm on a separate device if you need one. 20 minutes. That is all the research is asking of you. The second mistake involves something you have probably been doing every single morning, possibly for decades, and something that has been recommended broadly in general wellness circles. It is drinking coffee or any caffeinated beverage within the first 30 to 45 minutes of waking. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is not an argument against coffee. The research on coffee and senior health is actually quite positive in many domains. The problem is timing, and the mechanism is important to understand. During the cortisol awakening response, your body is already producing its most powerful natural stimulant. Cortisol, at its morning peak, delivers alertness, mental clarity, and metabolic activation through mechanisms your body has been refining over a lifetime. When you introduce caffeine during that same window, you are not adding to the cortisol effect. You are partially suppressing it. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors. Adenosine is the compound that builds up during waking hours and eventually makes you feel sleepy. But when you block those receptors during the peak of the cortisol awakening response, you interfere with the natural hormonal rhythm in a way that leads to two predictable consequences: a faster crash in the mid-morning hours and a reduced cortisol response over time that contributes to something called hypocortisolism, or in plain language, a chronically blunted morning energy response that makes it harder to feel alert naturally. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a pot of water that is just reaching a full, rolling boil on its own. If you add cold water at that exact moment, you do not accelerate the process. You interrupt it, and the pot takes longer to reach full boil again. That is essentially what early morning caffeine does to your cortisol awakening response after the age of 60. The research recommendation here is specific. A minimum of 45 minutes after waking before consuming any caffeine, preferably 90 minutes. I know that sounds difficult for committed coffee drinkers, and I am not asking you to give up coffee. I am asking you to shift it by 1 hour. Drink water first, hydrate your cells through their natural waking process, and let the cortisol peak do its work before you introduce caffeine. Many of my patients who made this single adjustment reported a sustained improvement in afternoon energy within just 2 weeks without changing anything else about their diet or routine. Give it 7 days, starting tomorrow morning, and pay attention to what your body tells you. Before we go further, I would like to ask you something. How old are you right now? In your 60s, your 70s, or beyond? And have you been experiencing that mid-morning energy crash that hits before noon, the one that makes you reach for another cup of coffee or feel like you need to sit down? Type your age and one word describing your morning energy in the comments. I read them. You would be surprised how many people share this exact pattern without ever connecting it to what time they drink their first cup. The third morning mistake is one that affects roughly 2/3 of adults over 60, and it involves posture. Specifically, what the research calls compressive spinal loading, which simply means the mechanical stress placed on your spine and its surrounding structures in the first few minutes after rising. Here is what the literature shows that most people do not know. During sleep, your intervertebral discs, the cushioning structures between each vertebra of your spine, absorb fluid and expand by as much as 19% compared to their daytime state. By morning, your spine is actually longer and under significantly more internal pressure than it will be at any other point in the day. It has been documented since the 1980s, but it rarely comes up in clinical conversations. If you rise abruptly from bed, rolling sharply to one side, pushing yourself up quickly, or immediately bending forward to put on slippers or pick something up from the floor, you are placing those fully expanded, fluid-saturated discs under acute compressive and rotational stress at their most vulnerable daily moment. In adults over 60, where disc degeneration is already a common structural reality, this matters considerably more than it does in younger people. A 2026 review published in Age and Aging examining spinal injury patterns in older adults found that a significant proportion of acute disc incidents in the 60 to 80 age group could be traced to the transitional moment between supine sleep and upright standing, the morning rise, not to gym injuries, not to heavy lifting, to getting out of bed. The practical correction is simple and takes no equipment. Before you sit up in the morning, spend 30 to 60 seconds performing gentle supine movement. Bring your knees slowly toward your chest. Let them fall gently side to side, and then roll to your side before using your arms to push yourself up rather than performing a direct forward fold. This transitions your spine through the pressure change gradually rather than abruptly. Start this tomorrow morning. It takes under a minute, and the research suggests it meaningfully reduces the risk of acute inflammatory responses in the disc structures that, once triggered, can take weeks or months to settle. I want to share something I do not say in every video. This particular pattern, people injuring their backs not at the gym, not at work, but in the quiet of their own bedroom while performing the most ordinary act of the day, is one that genuinely concerns me about the gap between what we know in the research and what patients are ever actually told. I have reviewed charts of patients in their early 70s who had been managing what they called a bad back for years, and when I asked them to describe exactly how they got out of bed each morning, the mechanism of repeated low-grade injury was immediately apparent. Nobody had ever asked them that question. Nobody had ever connected those two things. That is the gap this channel exists to close. If this is already helping you see your mornings differently, please hit that like button. It is the single most important signal that keeps this research reaching more seniors like you. The fourth morning mistake involves light, specifically the absence of it. I am not talking about light therapy in any clinical sense. I am talking about one of the most robustly supported findings in chronobiology, which is the field that studies the body's internal timing systems and how natural light exposure in the morning functions as the master calibration signal for virtually every hormonal and metabolic process that will occur across your next 24 hours. The body's primary biological clock, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which simply means the internal clock located in the brain's hypothalamus, uses light detected through the retina in the morning hours to set the timing of cortisol release, melatonin suppression, insulin sensitivity, immune cell activation, and dozens of other downstream processes. In younger adults, this system is responsive and relatively forgiving of variability. In adults over 60, the retinal sensitivity to morning light begins to decline, and the internal clock becomes less precise in the absence of consistent, strong light cues. 20 years ago, in the early 2000s, what we understood about morning light and aging was largely limited to seasonal affective disorder and circadian rhythm disruption in shift workers. Today, in 2026, the evidence connects morning light exposure directly to metabolic health, inflammatory regulation, and even cognitive protection in older adults in ways we would not have predicted 2 decades ago. A study published in JAMA in February 2026 followed 4,019 adults over 65 for 2 years and found that those who received a minimum of 10 minutes of outdoor natural light exposure within the first hour of waking showed 34% lower rates of clinically significant depressive symptoms, 28% better metabolic regulation scores, and markedly lower evening cortisol, meaning their stress hormone came down at the end of the day as it should, rather than remaining elevated. The contrast was not between people who spent hours outside versus those who stayed indoors. It was between those who stepped outside for 10 minutes and those who did not. 10 minutes. That is the threshold the data supports. I have watched patient after patient make this single addition to their morning. 10 minutes, early, outdoors, even on a cloudy day, because natural light still delivers sufficient photon intensity, and report improvements in their daytime energy, sleep quality, and mood within days. Your body is looking for this signal every morning. It has been looking for it since before you were born. After 60, it simply cannot manufacture the timing precision it once had without that external cue. Step outside tomorrow morning within the first hour of waking. You do not need to exercise. You do not need to look at the sun. Simply stand in natural light for 10 minutes. Allow your retina to receive what your biology is expecting. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you noticed that your energy, mood, or sleep quality varies significantly depending on whether you spend any time outdoors in the morning? Type yes in the comments if you have noticed this connection, or 0 if you have not. This helps other viewers who are reading the comments understand that they are not alone in what they are experiencing. The fifth morning behavior is the one that the research I mentioned earlier, the January 2026 paper from the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, specifically highlights as having the most measurable impact on inflammatory aging markers in adults over 60. And it is so ordinary that I know with near certainty that many of you are doing it right now without any awareness that it is a biological issue. It is drinking too little water or nothing at all in the first 30 minutes of waking. Let me explain what the research shows about what is happening in your body at that moment. By the time you open your eyes in the morning, you have typically been without fluid intake for 7 to 9 hours. During that time, your body has continued to use water for cellular repair, immune surveillance, and the metabolic processes that occur during deep sleep. Your blood has become measurably more viscous, thicker in plain language, than it will be at any other point in the day. Your kidneys are at their most concentrated. The lining of your digestive tract is at its least hydrated, and your lymphatic system, which is responsible for clearing metabolic waste products and inflammatory compounds produced during overnight cellular repair, is moving slowly and needs fluid to resume full circulation. Think of your lymphatic system in the morning like a slow drain after a long night. The pipes are still there. The mechanism is intact, but the fluid that keeps them moving is sitting at the bottom of the system, concentrated and viscous after hours of work with no replenishment. Drinking water within the first 15 to 20 minutes of waking is not a wellness trend. It is the mechanical requirement of a system that has been running without input for most of the night. For adults over 60, this matters more than in younger decades for a specific reason. The thirst signal weakens with age. This is one of the most well-documented and least discussed aspects of aging physiology. Younger adults feel thirsty when their bodies need water. Adults over 60 frequently do not. The signal has dulled, which means you can reach genuine cellular dehydration without ever feeling the prompt to drink. This is called physiological hyposthenia of thirst response, or in plain terms, the age-related blunting of the thirst mechanism. And it means you cannot rely on how you feel to tell you whether your body needs water in the morning. You have to build the habit independently of the signal. Patricia was 74 years old, a retired school principal from Nashville, Tennessee. She came into my clinic with what she described as persistent morning brain fog that never fully lifted before 10 in the morning, along with joint stiffness that her previous physician had simply attributed to arthritis progression. She had been on anti-inflammatory medication for 3 years. When I reviewed her daily routine, one thing stood out immediately. She drank her first fluid of the day, always coffee, at roughly 45 minutes after waking, and rarely drank more than 1 or 2 glasses of water throughout the rest of the morning. She had stopped feeling thirsty in her late 60s and had simply never questioned it. We did not change her medications. We did not change her diet. I asked her to do one thing: drink 2 full glasses of room temperature water within 10 minutes of waking every morning before anything else. Within 3 days, she called the clinic. "Dr. Whitmore," she said, "the fog is lifting by 8 o'clock now. I can't explain it, but my mind is clearer than it has been in 2 years." Within 2 weeks, she described the joint stiffness as noticeably less severe by mid-morning. 3 months later, in conversation with her primary care physician, her inflammatory markers had improved enough that they discussed reducing her anti-inflammatory dosage. This was not a miracle. This was her body finally receiving what it had been running without, silently, every morning, for years. Small adjustments, measurable outcomes. The same is available to you, starting tomorrow morning. The January 2026 study I referenced followed 3,214 adults over 60 and found that those who consumed a minimum of 400 milliliters of water, roughly 2 standard glasses, within the first 15 minutes of waking showed an average 31% reduction in morning inflammatory cytokine levels, improved cognitive processing scores by early afternoon, and lower rates of blood pressure spikes in the first 2 hours after rising compared to those who did not. 31%. And the intervention cost nothing, required no prescription, and took less than 2 minutes to complete. The practical application here is as simple as the evidence is clear. Before you do anything else tomorrow morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before checking your phone, before anything, drink 2 full glasses of room temperature water. Room temperature, not cold, because cold water creates a mild thermal shock to the digestive tract that is unnecessary and counterproductive for the morning system reactivation process. 2 glasses. Within 15 minutes of waking, make it automatic. Set the glasses out the night before if that helps. Treat it as a biological requirement, not a preference, because the research is telling you that is exactly what it is. If what you have heard so far has been valuable, share this video with someone you love who is over 60. Think of your parents, your siblings, your closest friend. One share starts a conversation that could genuinely change how they experience every single morning for the rest of their life. Now, let me walk you through exactly how to put all of this into practice, starting tomorrow morning. When your eyes open, do not touch your phone. Leave it face down or across the room. Before you sit up, spend 30 to 60 seconds doing gentle movement while still lying on your back. Bring your knees to your chest, let them fall slowly side to side, and breathe. Then roll to your side and use your arms to push yourself up. Within the first 10 minutes, drink 2 full glasses of room temperature water. Set them out tonight so they are waiting for you. Within the first hour of waking, step outside for 10 minutes. No agenda, no exercise required. Stand in natural light and let your biology receive the calibration signal it is designed to use. Wait a minimum of 45 minutes, ideally 90, before your first coffee or any caffeinated drink. Hydrate first, then caffeinate. And for the first 20 minutes of your morning, keep digital screens out of your hands. Let your nervous system complete its own transition from sleep before you ask it to process the world's information. Within 3 days of starting this routine, many of my patients begin reporting less morning stiffness and a clearer head before 9 in the morning. Within a week, sleep quality frequently begins to improve because what you do in the first hour of the day directly regulates the hormonal signals that determine how deeply you sleep that night. Within 2 weeks, energy patterns across the day often stabilize noticeably. Within a month, the inflammatory changes that the research documents begin to show up in how you feel in your joints, your digestion, and your cognitive sharpness. None of these are dramatic transformations. They are the quiet, compounding results of 5 small corrections that the research has been pointing toward for years. You are not broken. The information you were given about your mornings was incomplete. This is not inevitable aging. These are specific, identifiable, correctable patterns, and the research says your body is ready to respond to the corrections, regardless of how many years those patterns have been in place. Age does not prevent you from becoming stronger. It simply raises the stakes of getting the small things right. Let me bring this all together. We have walked through 5 morning behaviors that the research shows are quietly accelerating biological aging in adults over 60. Reaching for your phone within the first 5 minutes of waking, consuming caffeine during the cortisol awakening window, rising abruptly from bed without transitional spinal movement, missing the first hour natural light signal your internal clock depends on, and failing to hydrate within the first 15 minutes of the day. Each one of these carries its own documented weight in the literature. But when you address them together, the effects compound. The system benefits are not additive, they are synergistic, because each of these 5 behaviors feeds into the same underlying set of hormonal, inflammatory, and neurological morning processes. Which of these 5 did you recognize most clearly in your own morning routine? That is what I want you to reflect on and share in the comments below. There is someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a closest friend, who is over 60 and has been waking up every day doing some version of these 5 things without any idea that the research has connected them to accelerated aging. Send this to them. That one share may be the most genuinely useful thing you do this week. One last thing. Everything I have shared tonight is general medical information based on published research and years of clinical experience. Every person's situation is unique. Before making changes, especially if you are currently on medication, managing a cardiovascular condition, or dealing with any form of hormonal or metabolic disorder, please have a full and honest conversation with your own physician. That is not a legal disclaimer. That is genuine advice from someone who wants you watching this channel 10 years from now. Take care of yourself. Starting tomorrow morning,